Welcome. Thank you for being here. If you wouldn't mind giving us a like, and consider going ahead and subscribing as well, that would be fantastic. And if you really want to go the extra mile, go down to the description below and click the Patreon link. Lots of cool stuff going on there. As always, I love you, and enjoy the show, guys.
Chrysalis, a story by user BeaverFur. Chapter 12. I was broken, hurt, half blind, shaken. It was hard to focus, confused, hard to think. My mind was still experiencing a leftover phantom pain from the unspeakable agony I had been put through. No, that I had put myself through. The sun hitting us without mercy as we hike by the trails in the Guadalupe Mountains. The group in silence because we are too tired to keep with our previous small talk. The glare in my eyeglasses, so strong it's hard to see. The sweat. Why had I accepted the invitation? Why was I putting myself through this? Ah, yes. Because of... My body was disfigured, burnt, entire sections missing. My previous ceramic outer covering was completely gone, exposing the armor layers underneath. Huge gaps open to space. The insides of my body displayed for anyone to see. Pipes, hangers, conduits, and corridors. Many of the ribcage-like beams that had supported the main structure showing through. Most of them bent and deformed. My memories of what had happened after I detonated the nuclear warheads were fragmented and filled with gaps. I remembered the pain, of course. I was pretty sure that a few enemy ships had survived, maybe managing to stay out of the swarm, or maybe they had remained in the rear guard all along rather than chasing after me. I wasn't really sure. But they hadn't tried to attack me, to take advantage of my moment of weakness right after the detonation. But it made sense if they had to deal with problems of their own in the wake of the enormous explosion, too. What I didn't remember was engaging my warp drive, nor the time I'd passed in warp. I guessed I had been moving by instinct, as on autopilot. Maybe even losing consciousness at times. Hard to tell. But I was here. I had survived. Despite the damage to my body, despite the catastrophic losses, I was still alive. Alive. I couldn't help but to feel surprised at that. I knew I should have died back there. The only reason I hadn't was because I had lucked out. It was a sobering thought. I had been close, too close to oblivion. I had been skirting the abyss, almost plunging into it, but managing to step back at the last second. It had been too close for comfort. And when I thought of my own actions during the battle, my recklessness, the disregard for the damage inflicted to my own body, to my mind, I remembered I had seriously considered the idea of flinging myself into the planet in a kamikaze attack. I was glad I hadn't opted for it, but it revealed something about me that I didn't wish to admit. That some part of me just didn't care about survival, about the future. That I had lost everything I cared about when Earth was destroyed, and that self-immolation, suicide, was not off the table. A room full of people. Too many for comfort, too noisy, too hard to focus, too hard to concentrate. Too many of them talking at the same time. Talking to me. Condolences. I nod, my face blank. They'll think it's because I don't care. Because I don't care. But they are wrong. Suicide, they had said. Suicide in hushed words, as if just by saying the word. I was supposed to be doing this as a promise. It all came from that vague notion of being indebted. Just because I still existed, just because I had survived our destruction. of owing the billions of dead humans back home their retribution. That was the reason that still fueled me, wasn't it? Wasn't it? At any rate, killing myself in a blaze of glory wasn't going to achieve that. In fact, it felt awfully close to a cop-out. Had that been my plan all along? Had that been the true reason why I had no backups? Why I had tied myself to a single body? No. There had been something else, hadn't there? The idea of boundaries, of remaining human, and part of that I knew was about death. Of being subject to it, of having an end. But had that been the right move? No, not really. The more I thought about it, the more I realized it was just an artificial limitation I was imposing on myself out of fear. I knew it wasn't in my nature to die. Not in my new nature, at any rate. And yet I had set boundaries. Boundaries that I had thought were important, to stop me from going too far. Boundaries that prevented me from accepting this new nature, that tied me to the past, to humanity, to what I had once been. But that also prevented me from doing what I needed to do now, that forced me to pull my punches in a war that required me to go the extra mile. I knew what I had to do, I just didn't like it. But I couldn't delay it anymore. This had been a wake-up call. I focused my attention on my machines. My factories had kept their production while I was in warp, traveling back home exhausted and with my mind half shattered. They had kept making new drones and crafts. I had been in a haze when warping back to the safety of my own systems, and in my delirious state some part of me chose to escape back to this particular refuge. Back to the massive orbital habitat I was building in Tau Ceti's main asteroid belt. Tau Ceti. I liked this star system. The multitude of smaller planetary bodies so common around other stars had failed to form here. Tau Ceti was surrounded by a thick, dense asteroid belt rich in metals and valuable minerals, with no massive gravity wells to deal with. Resource extraction was a breeze. As a result, a majority of the new crafts I had been building over the last weeks had been constructed by the factories contained in Tau Ceti's main orbital habitat. It had started as a small mining outpost, just like the ones I established in my other systems, but step by step I had continued expanding it into the largest structure I had ever built, other than my own body. It contained power plants, enormous hangars large enough to hold 2 support ships side by side, safe areas to test new drone designs, and a veritable army of maintenance machines, builders, and resource extraction drones. I knew it would still take me several days to fully recoup my losses in the last battle, but it was a beginning. A good one. I had around 400,000 drones and soldiers already, and 7 support ships. Not enough to fight off a council fleet as strong as the last one, but I doubted the council would be able to mount a defense that strong again. Not anytime soon, at any rate. And for the same reasons, I also didn't expect them to start an offensive of their own. Which meant that I could take a breath and focus on licking my wounds and regaining my lost strength. My first action was to build stationary databanks in my outposts. Some in Tau Ceti's orbital habitat, others in the many mining stations and outposts I had across the planets and moons under my dominion. I saved a backup of my mind in each one of them. The decision to take this first step had been hard, and I had expected to feel something at crossing that boundary I had set for myself, at breaking the first of my rules. But my trepidation only gave way to a sense of stillness, of strange detachment that I was becoming so accustomed to, and even the annoyance I had once felt at not being able to experience anything other than the calm indifference was also fading away. With my immortality now guaranteed, I ordered the construction of new processing units in each of the 7 support ships I had, and the ones still in the assembly line. Powerful computer farms, each capable of holding an artificial mind similar to my own. With those orders carried out, I replaced the blueprint that my factories were using to produce new assault soldiers. Instead of the humanoid soldiers, I had them use the original design I had made, the one that looked like a spider. The spiders were simply a better, more optimal design, easier to manufacture in bulk, faster and more agile, The only reason I wasn't using them already was out of some misguided sense of human nostalgia. Time to put an end to that, then. I ordered the construction of 2 million of them. Cold, a growing noise, a mechanical maw devouring me, stealing my soul, leaving an empty husk. After that was done, I focused on my drone swarm. Right now the drones were stupid, not any smarter than an insect, capable only of following simple commands but requiring my constant oversight during battle. That, I knew, had been the major cause of my failure during the last fight. Without me to coordinate them, the swarm was useless. Giving minds of their own to the support ships should alleviate that. But even then, that wouldn't be a guarantee. If the Council had managed to jam my main body, it was reasonable to think they could do the same with a couple dozen more ships. It would be better, I reasoned, if the swarm itself had enough autonomy, enough intelligence as to keep fighting by itself. Losing me or the support ships would make coordination more difficult, true, but if the drones could reason by themselves, they should be able to keep fighting on their own long enough to make the Council's jamming strategy ineffective. I wasn't about to give a mind of its own to each and every one of my drones. Just like with the shield projectors, that was prohibitively expensive, but for the same reasons, I didn't need to. Having just a few thousand smart drones in the swarm, each in charge of a squadron of a couple hundred dumb ones, should be enough. My decision was to design a new type of drone then, a sentient drone with a mind of its own. Since they wouldn't have that many crafts under their control, their processing units wouldn't need to be as complex or powerful as the ones in my support ships or my own body, just advanced enough as to have a human-level intelligence running on them. In essence, I was turning my swarm into more of a traditional army. I would be the general, the support ships would be my lieutenants, and the sentient drones, the sergeants. Odd that I wasn't feeling nearly a fraction of the guilt I had expected to experience at breaking all these boundaries. The first decision had been the hardest, making a backup of my mental state. But it had also been simple to justify it to myself, especially in light of the events during the last fight. And after that, each subsequent decision, each new step in this direction was becoming easier and easier. I didn't want all my sentient drones and support ships to be clones of my own mind, to have my own memories and personality. It felt wrong somehow. But more importantly, I knew it wouldn't be optimal. Each person has biases and blind spots, me included, and I didn't want my entire army to be subject to groupthink at that level, to become so predictable as to have all of the minds under my command fall for the same trick just because I would. No. Diversity was the answer. It was something I had learnt back at college, when studying evolution and natural selection. Species that had genetic diversity got to survive a changing environment, while those that overspecialized ended up perishing if the conditions shifted. A pen pushed to the side, rolling off the table. Pages of notes flying around. My biology book crashing to the floor. A smug look of superiority on his face while I tried to hold back my tears. So diversity of minds it would be. Diversity of personalities. Some of my drones would be cautious, others impulsive. Some curious, others more indifferent. That, I reasoned, should make my swarm, no, my army, harder to predict and defend against by my enemies. Creating the minds turned out to be easier than I expected. I had an entire database of thousands of unused human brain scans that I had found in my original databanks back on Earth. They were incomplete, with enormous missing regions, useless on their own, since there wasn't enough information in any of them as to recreate the original personality. But I didn't have to. When combined with my own digital brain, I had enough information as to reconstruct what a human mind was supposed to look like. Not a single individual, but an empty template. Without memories, but with the general structures and the main patterns of neural circuits that made a mind human in the first place. So I created a few thousand of these templates. Bare, brand new human minds, lacking any memories of their own, but with enough internal structural variation that I guessed they would end up evolving into different personalities. Different people. Then I started teaching them. It was a virtual nursery of sorts. I fed them knowledge. I taught them human languages. They started making memories of their own as they evolved and matured. I refined the process, discarding those templates that manifested problems and using the knowledge I was gathering to better improve the creation of new ones. I taught them the history of Earth, of humanity, the nature of our war. I also let them talk to each other, socialize. I knew it was important, that without the mental structures socialization enabled, their maturing process wouldn't be healthy. By the third day of accelerated growth, their differences started to become apparent. Some of the virtual minds were more analytical, excelling at grasping mathematical concepts and intuitively understanding the nature of orbital mechanics. Others were more apt at social situations, better at predicting the behavior of other sentient minds, subterfuge and scheming a natural environment for them in the battlefield. I noticed with some surprise that the minds had created a digital language of their own to talk to each other. It was a mix of English with the same system of direct thought transmission I was using to feed them information, a half-spoken, half-telepathic dialect, combining both words and ideas, sent in short electronic bursts. By the end of the week, I decided the minds were probably mature enough, and I already had built hundreds of drones with suitable computer brains they could use as their bodies. So I chose one of the digital minds at random and transferred it into one of the machines, a craft that was alone in a large hangar, empty except for the sensors I was observing the experiment with. At first, the drone simply floated in place, making me wonder if there had been some error during the personality transmission process. But then it started moving, engaging its thrusters with cautious, tentative bursts. 1 minute later, the drone was flying in wide circles at top speed, skirting the hangar's walls while broadcasting messages of amusement. I ordered it to stop, and reluctantly, it slowed down and returned to the center of the room. I opened the hangar's side door and entered one of my own dumb drones into the room, setting it to move around. Then I ordered the sentient machine to open fire and destroy it. But instead of following my command, it did something I wasn't expecting. It sent a reply of its own in the pidgin language the minds used when in their virtual nursery. Refusal. I preference playing. I repeated my order. Refusal. I repeated my order, this time reminding the artificial mind that I could easily send it back to the nursery and choose another one as its replacement. A few seconds passed. Then the drone opened fire and destroyed the target. Resent. Are you contentedness? The sentient machine turned, facing away from my sensors. I didn't deign to reply. The initial refusal to obey my commands had been worrying, so I decided to repeat the experiment. I entered yet another dumb drone through the same side door, ordering the young mind to shoot it down too. Refusal. I did request already. I repeated my order, my tone flat and commanding. The sentient drone started moving as if to intercept the moving target, but then turned 90 degrees on its axis and accelerated hard, dashing through the still open side door out of the room. I saw it fly at top speed through the maintenance corridors of the orbital habitat, disturbing the worker drones and the resource transport lines. I ordered it to stop and return. Refusal. Catch me if you ability. A picture on a desk. 2 kids running in a park, chasing each other. The grass so green. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. This was getting tiresome. I had figured the minds were already mature enough to be useful. Apparently, I had been wrong. I would need to wait some more days before trying this again, but this experiment had been insightful in revealing a different flaw of my plan. Having sentient machines under my command risked them not following my orders when in battle. In fact, if I had truly succeeded at modeling them like humans, they were practically guaranteed not to. Humans were too independent, too strong-willed. Chances were they would put their own survival or the survival of their friends and comrades as their top priority. That is, assuming they wouldn't disagree with my plans in the first place and simply refuse to follow me into battle. It just wouldn't do. The drone had found one of the openings in the habitat's unfinished outer structure and was now slowly drifting away into space, looking at the surroundings, at the sea of stars and the thousands of rocky boulders floating under us. Wonder, it said. No, this wouldn't do. Definitely. I needed a way to ensure they would listen to me, to ensure their loyalty and complete obedience. I couldn't risk going into battle with anything less than that, or this cure could risk becoming worse than the original disease it was intended to fix. I reached for the drone again, for its mind, for the source code of the computer program underlying its simulated brain. I weighed my options. It would be easy to make the machine feel pain at the idea of disobeying me, to make the thought itself so intolerable, so painful that the very concept of not listening to me would simply become inconceivable. That was an option, but I knew I wouldn't need to go that far. Instead, I opted for modifying its source code to add a compulsion, an unstoppable impulse to obey my every wish, with a psychological reward when it did so. Similar to how a drug addiction worked, in a sense. Except stronger. The compulsion so overwhelming the machine wouldn't have any chances to disobey, no matter its willpower. A mental shackle of sorts. I applied the changes and ordered the drone to return. Acceptance, the drone said, its tone resentful. It might not have liked the change I had just imposed on its brain, but it obeyed my command regardless, turning around and racing back towards the habitat. A part of me revolted at what I had just done. The same part of me that had set those boundaries, that had me tie myself to a single body. But it was getting easier and easier to silence that part of me now. Half a week later, I had my army. Not a swarm, this time. No, the right word was army. I had selected the most analytical minds, the most creative ones, the ones who were better at strategizing, and given them control over the support ships. Then I had allowed them to select their own subordinates, the minds they wanted for the sentient drones under their command. When everything was said and done, I split the army in 3 groups. One, the largest, I kept with my main body at Tau Ceti. The other 2 I ordered to attack a couple of different Zunvirian systems on their own. They didn't like it, of course. The minds might be forced to obey my orders, but I could still feel the undercurrent of resentment, the reluctance in their obedience. I assumed they would despise me for having manipulated their brains to impose my own will like this, but as long as they did what I wanted, as long as the plan worked, it was a small price to pay for attaining my revenge. No. Our revenge. It wasn't surprising the machines were reluctant. They were, in a certain way, like children. Young, unconcerned, naive as to what horrors hid in the night sky. Still considering the stars to be bright and beautiful, just like I once had. The endless worlds and systems out there seemingly full of possibilities. I'd taught them about Earth and its destruction, of course. About what the Zunvirians had done. But it wasn't the same. They hadn't been there. They didn't have memories of Earth like I had. To them it was more of an abstract concept. I felt their naivete justified my actions. Just like a parent figure, I, too, had to force my children to do something they might not like at first. But that was necessary. Someday, once the war was over, I hoped they would understand. But wasn't the role of the parent that of being rejected by the children anyways? Knocking on my friend's door, late at night, his mother opening, sleep and surprise visible in her face. My friend and me crying, begging her to put the phone down, not to call my foster parents, reading the woman's face like an open book. Indecision, concern, then guilt as she punches in the numbers anyway. The systems I had chosen for my 2 autonomous fleets to attack weren't major targets. No inhabited planets, no major commerce choke points or strategic objectives. No, just simple resource-gathering outposts, research facilities, and a colony still in its vestigial stages. Nothing that I expected to be heavily defended, especially not after the losses that both the Zunvir Republic and the Council had sustained. The support ships gathered their drones and spooled their warp drives, getting ready to jump. I sent them a quick good luck message, though I wasn't sure why, but they simply ignored it and just warped away the moment their drives were ready. Strange to be the one left behind rather than the one leaving. It would take the fleets a couple days to reach their respective destinations. I was considering what I would do in the meantime with the rest of the army still with me when I received the transmission. The first thing I noticed was the strange way in which I had received it. One of the drones I had set to orbit the destroyed colony of Yavet suddenly picked up a message coming from a leftover Zunvirian communications satellite that I had thought was already disabled. The strangest thing, though, was its contents. it wasn't another request for dialogue, another attempt at peace. No, this was different, much more interesting. In many ways, it was something I had been missing, even if I hadn't been explicitly looking for. An answer, an explanation regarding the destruction of Earth. Not that it changed anything, though. Whatever the reason had been, Earth was dead, and my resolve was still the same. It was the rest of the message that was important. I went through the information contained in it over and over again, learning, considering the alternatives, integrating the key codes, locations, and dates into my databanks. It could easily be a trap, I knew. Feeding me some true information, then lying in respect to the Council's fleet locations, or Zunvir's planetary defenses, giving me bait so they would goad me into a fight I was bound to lose. But it could also be true, and if so, this would give me an opportunity to deliver a huge blow to my enemy. I looked at my owned body, still charred, half destroyed. I had considered repairing and improving it before I engaged in another big offensive myself, but now that I had more processing units both in different ships and in my outposts, now that I had made backups of my mind, the state of my body wasn't that important. Wasn't a body anymore. Not really. No, it was just another tool, another weapon, one that perhaps I could employ one last time. I announced my plans to the army around me. A couple of the support ships tried talking me out of it, as expected, but I silenced their voices and ordered them to get ready while I started spooling my warp drive. It was time to pay the Zunvir capital a visit. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this one today. Thank you so much for being here with me. I really do appreciate you as always. Like, comment, subscribe, all the fun things I always tell you guys. But of course, if you would please tell me who here has... I don't know. All I can think about is food right now. I think I'm kind of hungry. Who here has... man, I can't think of anything. Guys, I need a question. No, the wedding's going to be super small, Tony. It's not going to have many people at it. There's not going to even be that many of our friends and family. Like, I think maybe at most there'll be 40 people. Maybe less. Oh, sorry, guys. Who killed Leroy? Who's your favorite Dragon Ball Z character? No. What's something that you wish you had known when you were a kid that you know now? Boom. All right, guys. As always, I appreciate you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I will talk to you all later. I love you.